other. We want you to take a chance to talk to people that maybe you haven't met before, people who live in different parts of Evanston. I think there's some things that we can all agree on. There are definitely concerns about the zoning that affects everybody in this room, and we're going to hear from some of our speakers about that. But for a very long time, there has been the concern that Northwestern has not really contributed meaningfully and sustainably to the well-being of Evanston. And I think that's something else that we all agree on, and we feel that we have a unique opportunity here to change that. So we're going to talk about some of the ways we can do that. As I was saying earlier, the Post-it notes you have, you can use to answer the questions along the window, which is, why did you come here today? What do you hope to learn today? And what do you hope this meeting accomplishes? And we are honestly very interested in your responses to those questions. We're going to be taking pictures of them, and that's going to be something that we work on in our future organizing. The white index cards you can use to ask questions of the panelists. We will be letting people ask some questions live, but we've got some people who are going to be collecting those index cards so that we can hear your questions for the speakers. And for those of you on Zoom, you can definitely also put your questions in the chat, and we will try and collect and respond to your questions as well. But just a few other short things that I want to say. Successful campaigns do not work just on anger. And I know there's a lot of anger in this room and in this community, but successful campaigns are based on camaraderie, based on friendship. And so I'm really hoping that today will be the beginning of establishing that kind of camaraderie throughout Evanston. We don't want to dismiss anybody's concerns. Those of us who don't live in the 7th Ward, I hope that you are not dismissing the very valid concerns of people in the 7th Ward. But those of you in the 7th Ward, I hope you are also open to the concerns of other people about labor issues, about racial discrimination, that we need to focus on all of these issues and speak with one concerted, unified message. And that message should be, Northwestern, we need you to respect Evanston. Thank you. Okay, check my notes now. All right, so what I'm going to do, I will introduce each panelist right before they speak. I'll introduce each panelist. They will each talk for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, guys. On their particular topic. While they're talking, please fill out your index cards and pass them to people who are collecting the cards so that we can get your questions answered. And then we'll take those question cards, but then we'll just have a general exchange. I'll be doing kind of the Oprah thing and walking up and down with my microphone and giving people a chance to ask questions. I will be holding on to the microphone, and we also hope that people won't be sort of standing up and talking, but really wait till the microphone gets to you so that everybody can hear you, okay? And I think the other thing is we don't want this to be an occasion just for bitterness, name-calling, grievances, anger. As I said, we know that there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of reason for that anger, but that's not something that's productive and it's not something that's going to move us forward. So if you have comments to make, focus on specific concerns and specific questions, not just on ranting and on venting, because there's already been a lot of that going on, okay? People have also asked why we didn't invite Northwestern to speak, and frankly, we feel that they've had plenty of opportunities to speak and plenty of platforms to get their word out. And today's meeting is about getting your questions out and your concerns, and not focusing on the concerns of that institution. So, with that, I am going to start with the panel. So we're going to begin with Dave Ellis. You want to raise your hand, Dave? So David Ellis has been involved in these issues for quite a while. He's a lifelong Evanston resident who's been active in local council politics for over 37 years. He was a fireman and paramedic for over 34 years and vice president of local union 742 and founder of its political action committee. And he is co-founder and co-chair of the Fair Share Action Committee. So we're going to hear from David about the history of the Fair Share Action Committee and how that's relevant to what's going on today. So take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Leslie. I'm Dave Ellis. It's a pleasure to be here. And Leslie, you highlighted exactly what it's all about. It's fairness. And that's really what the Fair Share Action Committee was founded on. That's the principle, and that's the common, as being in Evanston for as long as I have been, That's the common denominator of all the citizens in Evanston, is they want fairness. They don't want extra, they don't want less, they just want to be treated fairly, whatever it is. And that's the commonality that I'm here to speak to today, is fairness. We founded Fair Share Action Committee in 1989 with the purpose of getting Northwestern to pay its fair share for services it receives. It's been, the town-gown relationships in Evanston have been bad for a very long time, and we wanted to try to set the table to create a structure where the relationships could get better. It takes two people, two sides to make relationships better. You have to have dialogue. You have to find out what the common interest is and where you're going. Alderman Jack Korshak in around 1985 created a head tax, which he thought would facilitate Northwestern paying its fair share, but that was ruled unconstitutional by the Illinois Supreme Court. What we did is we asked the council to put it on a referendum. They refused to do that. They says, you can do whatever you want. Okay, and I'm always a guy that if you want me to do it, I'll do it. Doesn't not work out the way you'd like, but I'm happy to do the work. So we got the signatures necessary to get it on a referendum. We had the referendum passed with over 86% of the voting public in favor of negotiating with Northwestern to get its fair share of services rendered. Northwestern receives a tremendous amount of services for free. I could go on for a lot more than 5 minutes of the history, what they get for free, what they're taking away from us in the community. And I guess because I only have 5 minutes, the point is that right now we're at the precipice with Northwestern wanting the stadium development. The council has leverage, and the citizens have leverage, to be able to get something for what Northwestern wants. Typically, they act unilaterally, and we deal with it afterwards. They take property off the tax rolls, they create whatever they want to create, and we're just kind of out there in the field. But with the Dyke Stadium or Ryan Field, whatever the name's going to be, now's the time where we can get abilities to negotiate. It's around probably $4.5 to $6 million a year. And people ask, what does that mean? Well, everything that goes to Northwestern, whether it's a toothbrush, garbage, food, construction materials, it all passes through our streets. All the congestion, all the traffic, that's something we have to live with. We provide police and fire services for them for no cost. There's costs associated with it. Everybody, all the taxpayers, carry the burden of supporting Northwestern. That's where the fairness comes in. Now, whether they have patents, whether they're not-for-profit, that's all a different discussion, a different debate. There are neighbors. I expect neighbors to pay their fair share. Whether it's a tree hanging over your property, it's a fence, or you're receiving services from a neighbor, you pay your fair share. That's the neighborly way to go. Northwestern is against that. They've been against that for a long time. They don't see any positive reason to negotiate. We are now at a time where they do have a reason to negotiate. We need to talk to the alderman and the mayor and express your views of what you think. I'm not saying the stadium is a good idea or a bad idea. All I'm saying is that Northwestern needs to pay its fair share, period. And if this is an opportunity to facilitate that, great. How am I doing, Leslie?
You got about 2 minutes.
Oh, good. All right. I'll just point out a couple of examples of how it works, okay? Just for some background information. The Allen Center at Northwestern is a hotel on Northwestern property. They have 150 beds. They have a liquor license. They have food. They don't pay hotel tax, liquor license, or food costs. Okay? They have 6,000 executives come into Northwestern every year. Limousine in, limousine out. That's business and taxes taken away from the city. Okay? That's one example. When we passed the Fair Share Action, when that legislation passed in 1990, Northwestern promised the city that it would not take any more property off the tax rolls until they notified the city of Evanston what they were going to do and when they were going to do it, and they wouldn't do it within 3 months prior to talking to the city. So the week after they agreed with that, literally a week after they agreed with the council to set up this framework, they took 1,900 Sherman off the tax rolls. That generates about $40,000 to $60,000 a year minimum on taxes back then. The taxpayers around the stadium area, a quarter mile around, pay $4 million a year in property tax. Half a mile around, they pay $8 million collectively in property tax. They continue to take property off the tax rolls. They continually use all the services. Previous councils have decided not to enact any meaningful dialogue with Northwestern and not to impress upon them the importance of what this means to all of the citizens, as you said, Leslie, all the citizens of Evanston. This is really not, for fair share was a citywide referendum. The only other referendum that passed like this, citywide, that was actually enacted, was the reduction of council members from 19 to 9, and that was 1985. But this affects all the citizens, all the taxpayers. It affects our budget. It affects the social services, or what we think is important for Evanston citizens. It affects the quality of our services. We are subsidizing a multi-billion-dollar a year, and I'll call it what it is, a corporation.
Yep, I think we're gonna stop there if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks so much, David. So you probably received some really glossy flyers and brochures in the mail from Northwestern about this project. And one of the claims that they've made is that this project is going to fund jobs, particularly for the Black and Brown community in Evanston, which we think is a rather cynical approach to the question. And so we have Kevin Brown here to talk about Northwestern's history with the Black community, including the Black Northwestern community. Kevin is the Senior Director of External Affairs and Community Partnerships for the Safer Foundation, and he's lived in Evanston since 1981. As the former City of Evanston Community Services Manager, he helped build one of the most successful youth development programs in America. He's co-founder of Evanston Rejects Racist Reparations and on the boards of the Citizens Network of Protection and the Democratic Party of Evanston, and also with the Community Alliance for Better Government. So please welcome Kevin Brown.
Thank you, Leslie. It's a very kind introduction. I'd be happy to see the balance of my time back to David, but I'm actually here. I don't really need that. I'm actually here to talk about my history with the university. I'm an alum of Northwestern University. I'm actually played football at Northwestern University and was one of the more successful athletes when Dennis Green was our head coach. So that's kind of, I have a long history of being here in Evanston and working with the university, working with the athletic program to target some of our most disenfranchised young people in this community. So I was disappointed when this proposal came out for this billion-dollar entertainment complex, given all of the challenges that we have in this community, particularly downtown with the homeless problem that we're seeing in this city, along with the violence that's taking place with our young people in this community. I'll just give you a couple anecdotes in this brief period of time. Back in 2015, I sat down with the university along with other university officials to talk about the Family Focus building, which is right next door. That building has a lot of structural problems, and it is highly utilized by young Black people in this community, young brown people in this community. A lot of programs that come out of that facility. So, along with some of my former professors at Northwestern University, we sat down and talked with some of the officials about helping out to possibly rehab that facility. One of the reasons that we went to the university is because it is probably the wealthiest entity in our community. It has a current endowment of about $15.4 billion. It's in the top 6, top 7 endowments in America. So with all of the resources that we have within our institution, as speaking as Northwestern University, you would think that there would be some willingness to be a good neighbor and to be a substantive contributor to the community. We were turned down at Family Focus, and they said it costs too much. That was what we were told. Cycle up to 2015, I met with officials at the university to create a workforce development and training program for African Americans and Latinos in this community. We talked about training folks in pipe fitting and locksmithing, painting. There's a variety of things that the Department of Facilities does at Northwestern. It's unionized. And when we met with the officials there, they said, yeah, let's create a program. Let's target the African American Latinos in this community, and let's create a workforce development and training pipeline. We put the program together and we started small. It was about 6 individuals a year. But the great thing about the program is that the 6 individuals who completed a year of training in the program were automatically, we had an agreement with the union, they were admitted into the unions, they were hired full-time into career pathway positions at the university. This went on for 4 years. We were able to get 24 people employed in the facilities department. They came to us when Mayor Steve Haggerty was elected, and they said, we can't do it anymore. And we said, well, the program is great. All of the employees are doing great. It's operating exactly as we asked you, that we all agreed it would operate. And they said, once again, it's too expensive. And so they canceled the program. Finally, I've been doing some work with the university and the athletic department, and trying to get the athletic department to do more than just photo opportunities with Family Focus, and to actually put some substantive programming in to help the kids in their development. They were not interested in pursuing that. It was more, they like these days where students can come to Family Focus, they can get pictures of black and brown children, they can publicize those pictures on their website, and then they disappear for the rest of the year. That's the reality. That is what the practice has been of the university, time in, time out. And I am upset by the fact that they would approach our community with this ruse to say that we're creating a project now that's going to create 3,000 jobs, and we're going to set aside these jobs and target the most disenfranchised in this community. It's not believable to me, because I've worked with the university for a couple decades, and their practice has been to do something, to take the photograph, to tell the community that they are doing something positive to uplift the community, but not sustain the effort.
Okay,
and
I think we're going to cut it off now, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it.
So Kevin was talking about labor issues and unionizing. And another issue with these supposed jobs that are going to be coming to us, do we know if these are going to be good jobs? And do we know if the jobs with the contractors Northwestern is working with are going to be good jobs? So here to talk about some of the labor-related issues, we have Emily Lozier from Northwestern. Emily has been a graduate student researcher at Northwestern for 4.5 years, and is the chair of Northwestern University Graduate Workers, United Electrical Workers, the newly recognized graduate student worker union at Northwestern. She's been involved in labor organizing since 2019 and has served on the board of the Science Policy Outreach Task Force, a STEM grad researchers organization which promotes evidence-based policy and science literacy for voters. So please welcome Emily.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you all for being here. So just wanting to lead off, as a graduate researcher myself, the first few years I was here, I lived in Evanston. I now live in Rogers Park, but I continue to work in Evanston, and my coworkers, we are in a similar boat where so much of our lives, so much of our working lives are determined, till now, by unilateral decisions on the part of Northwestern University that we do not get a real say in. This was the impetus for the unionization effort that came to successful fruition this year. And we're here today because we want to contribute in any effort aimed at ensuring that Northwestern doesn't, get away with making unilateral decisions that impact people's lives without meaningful and enforceable stuff in place to make sure that the benefit can be positive. And so, we're interested in being here to help in that effort to see that as many, stakeholders in this decision as possible who are affected by the stadium rebuild, including low-income, Black, and Latino Evanston residents, graduate students, undergraduates, and precariously employed faculty, as well as staff, all of us who live and work, we can have a say in this effort. So our recent campaign and election win this winter are proof that through organized collective action, we can make Northwestern say yes to things that they don't necessarily want to say yes to at first blush. And that, when we were first putting the card campaign together and said, hey, we have a majority of students who want this grad union, Northwestern declined to recognize that union voluntarily. And so we went through with an election that we won with 93.5% support. And so, this was a sign to us that, and we won there. Our next step are contract negotiations and to have this enforceable way to assert our rights and to get that fair share to do, a callback there. And really that is going to also be the result of collective action. We will win what we are organized to win, right? And the same thing I think holds in this case. So what then is the strategy for seeing a community benefits agreement that is able to allow us to enforce these kinds of benefits? Being here today with all of you, this is a step in the right direction. We're going to be a part of this, seeing this a coalition of community stakeholders coming together to push for this. That's going to be the vehicle to approach this. And there is precedent for having community benefit agreements with items with real teeth involved. There is a soccer stadium in Nashville as an example where a community benefits agreement called for the following benefits, including investment in affordable housing, a wage floor for stadium workers, a hiring program for low-income and minority residents, a child care facility and subsidized retail space for small businesses, sports programs for local residents, job training programs, and a community advisory committee of community groups to oversee the implementation of the project. And we can take inspiration from that in this effort and could pursue some level of contractual benefits. We might demand that Northwestern set up campus childcare for university workers and low-income Evanston residents. And some of the other demands that we could pursue together in this sense might include, from the labor perspective, demanding neutrality in the event of further segments of workers at Northwestern or Northwestern contractors, because Northwestern does have responsibility to workers who are employed by contractors who contract with Northwestern. They can't, so there is a responsibility there. So neutrality if those workers seek to unionize, and a promise to require that contractors on the project remain neutral if their workers seek to unionize. Having that in balance with a contractual commitment to ensure that a high share of work goes to minority contractors, especially if those contractors agree to cooperate or maintain neutrality with unionization. And expanded mental health facilities for all university stakeholders, including grad students and Evanston residents. And, pursuing that through a community benefits agreement is one prong of approach for this. But I mean, we are in the position now where we've won our union as graduate workers, and we're about to embark on negotiating a collective bargaining agreement and a contract. And we have important examples and leads we can follow in terms of this concept of bargaining for the common good. The Chicago Teachers Union is a great example of this. In adopting this strategy in which we negotiate for provisions in our contract that affect not just graduate workers, but raise the floor and raise the water level for all, for community members as well. So benefiting that broader community, seeing ourselves as a part of the Evanston community as opposed to an island from it. So we would have the best chance of securing these demands if we turned our bargaining into a joint community effort in which many of you would have our backs, where we have your backs, and apply pressure on Northwestern jointly, because it will require organized and concerted pressure. So with that, I will conclude by saying, we have created a team to help with coordinating all this on our end. We want to be having this open dialogue and interfacing with community groups. If you're interested in learning about what we're doing there, plugging into that, opening that dialogue, we really want to hear from you, really want to be connected with you. So maybe if anyone here who is here with NUGW, if you want to raise your hand right now. So come chat with us. We want to talk about how we can work together on this, and very excited to hear all the ideas that come out of it today.
Wow, thank you so much, Emily. Would also say there's a handout at the back that you'll get when you leave. There's a website that is for this whole coalition, so you'd be able to get on the mailing list of Emily's group, as well as CABG, as well as Most Livable City Association. So our final speaker, and then we'll get into the questions, is David DeCarlo from the Most Livable City Association. And expand my notes again. All right, so David is an attorney and one of the founders of the Most Livable City Association, which is a nonprofit formed by community members to raise concerns about the Ryan Field project. He and his wife are raising 2 little kids in what he hopes will remain a livable city for all. So please welcome David DeCarlo.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you everyone for coming. For those who are on Zoom, I know you can't see the crowd that we have here, but the room is packed, and we've got, it's just great the participation in this. I'm going to talk about what's at stake with our zoning laws and where we are in the process. But first, I did want to start just with a little bit about my own family. Really, actually going back before Dyke Stadium was built, there were regular Evanstonians like my wife's great-grandma, my kid's great-great-grandma, who were making the city into one of the greatest places that it is to live today. And she was a single mom who had moved to the Central Street neighborhood to raise her family. My wife and I moved there a few years ago to start our family. Our home's a couple blocks from the stadium, and it's the only one our 2 young kids have ever known, and we hope to continue raising them there. Their great-great-grandma I mentioned, she actually worked in the cafeteria at Haven Middle School around the time it opened, and their great-grandpa returned to the neighborhood after World War II to support his mom and start his own family, and their grandpa was baptized just down the street from us at St. A's. And I've mentioned all that because throughout these generations, all these homes, places of worship, small businesses, schools, and Evanston Hospital have coexisted with Northwestern's football stadium. But that's not just an accident. And throughout Evanston, there are great neighborhoods that aren't just extensions of this powerful university that sometimes needs room to expand. And that's not just by chance. What has allowed us to control our destiny in this city is our zoning laws, where we decide, rather than Northwestern, what our future looks like. In my part of Evanston, Northwestern has been trying to turn its athletic facilities into for-profit entertainment complex since at least the 1950s. But time and again, Evanston's come together and they said no to these schemes. Now the university wants to spend almost $1 billion demolishing its stadium to make way for the new Ryan Field, and they want to take a wrecking ball to the zoning laws too. I mean, it's really some drastic changes if you read the text amendment that they are proposing. The university is asking for unlimited for-profit events of up to 10,000 people. Plus they want 10 mega concerts every summer of up to 35,000 people. And that's bigger than the Allstate Arena or the United Center. Northwestern's PR campaign kind of paints it as they're doing us all a favor. that we should be happy letting them use the new stadium however they want, and that a small portion of the profit that they make on these huge events will trickle down to the rest of us in Evanston. But trickle-down economics isn't going to solve our problems. It never has. If we want real community benefits, then we have to negotiate for them. In exchange for the new stadium Northwestern wants, our community should ask for the things that we value. I'm going to echo a lot of the points that have been made. Direct investment in our schools, commitments in writing for local and minority hiring, protections for our unions, free access to the stadium plazas, respect for our zoning laws, and more. Since Northwestern just signed a Big Ten media deal worth up to $100 million a year, they can more than afford the new stadium and to pay their fair share. We also have to stay true to our own values in all this, not Northwestern's or their billionaire donors for this. If all that mattered was development, wouldn't we have long ago privatized Dawes Park or the Harley Clark? Or even asked for a casino on Church Street? We haven't done that because part of what makes Evanston livable, besides our parks and beaches and small businesses, public transit, and this world-class university, are the less tangible things. And it was Bobby Kennedy who said that it's things like the health of our children, the quality of their education, the joy of their play, the beauty of our poetry, the strength of our marriages, the integrity of our public officials, everything in short which makes life worthwhile. There's many before us that are like like those of us who moved here seeking a more livable city where we could put down our roots or raise a family. And we really put our faith in our city's leaders to keep us oriented towards that North Star. But the question that's coming before us very quickly is, will our leaders do that, or will they be tempted to let Northwestern steer our city in the uncertain direction that it wants to go? The university has been trying to fast-track the approval process and get the things that it wants. The first is the massive new stadium with the zoning variances for inadequate parking and more. The zoning amendment so it can operate the stadium and the arena as a for-profit entertainment complex, completely free from property taxes. And then its request to sell alcohol at every stadium event so it can compete with tax-paying local restaurants and bars. The first steps in this process could come very soon as March, some are saying, so I do hope we can start organizing some more together and ensuring that our community benefits from the new Ryan Field and getting the promises that we need in writing so that it really is a benefit to the entire city. Thank you.
Okay, so now it's time to hear from you and hear your questions. I've already collected quite a few, so I'm going to go with the questions that I have already. But then we will have a chance for everybody to just raise your hand and have me come over and let you ask your question. So a couple of these are for specific people, but most of them are for the panel in general. So we mentioned the economic impact study, and someone asked, can we conduct an independent economic impact study prior to our zoning changes? And I will tell you that the City Council is already planning to do that. In fact, there was a firm, Hunden Strategic Partners, that was originally tapped to do the economic impact study, but we found a few unsavory things about that company, so they're no longer in the running. But yes, the city is planning to do an independent economic impact study. The other question, and I think we kind of know the answer to this, is how is a for-profit concert venue consistent with the mission of the nonprofit educational institution? And I don't know if anybody wants to give an answer to that.
Well, obviously, the answer is self-evident, but Northwestern is the guise of its non-for-profit, and it's contrary to that. They have enough money, as mentioned, they can do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, I hate to be so base, but unfortunately, the city of Evanston is kind of a plantation-type relationship. They do what they want to do. They'll give us some scraps, or like you said, Kevin, a photo op or a pat on the back or whatever, and go out about your business. It's not fair. It's not right. Like I said, the patents that they have, they own. That makes the money. This whole operation with the stadium, they're not doing that out of generosity. They're not doing that out of the kindness of the heart. They're not doing that to support the city. They're doing that for money. I mean, it is what it is. Whether you like the idea or not, it's all about money, unfortunately. our alderman the city council needs to be directed by its citizens of how to proceed with this. You know, it's supposed to be collective bargaining, where you sit down with somebody and bargain in good faith. It's not collective begging. And historically, the city has begged for things from Northwestern, and they'll give a couple, crumbs here and there, and they move on and do go about their business. One other point I'd just like to bring up, because I didn't bring it up earlier, it's not like this is a unique environment or situation. Northwestern's whatever, it's with top 10 colleges in the country. Northwestern is the only university that doesn't contribute fair share to its host city. Harvard does, Yale does, Stanford does, Cornell does, University of Illinois does. The list goes on and on. And these are enlightened institutions. So I got to believe that Northwestern's enlightened, and they know exactly what they're doing.
Okay. So we talked about the zoning, and Emily was talking and David was talking about negotiating and what we would demand for Northwestern in exchange for what they want to do. But I think a really important question is how much we're willing to compromise on zoning. So the question is, how do people on the panel feel about the zoning, and what other variances are they asking for, and what is it actually that we feel we could negotiate on? And David, this may be more for you.
I think we have to start with the point that there's just the fact that they're building an almost $1 billion stadium is a point of negotiation. So this thing that they have already proposed does not have adequate parking. They don't want to address that, so they're going to request a variance for that. It's going to be significantly larger than the current size of the facility, not in terms of seats, but in terms of actually how tall it is, how much floor area it has. So it's a major development, and so other communities use that as a negotiating point, because if you're going to put this much money into $1 billion stadium, let's talk about some of the other things that Northwestern could be doing for our community as a whole in terms of direct investments as well.
Okay. So go ahead.
Can I add one thing? One of the issues that I think is important, I agree with everything that's been said around the zoning. I'm also, when we think about the use of Northwestern facilities, we think about the use of this possible new facility. For most people, for a large number of people in this community, a lot of their athletic and entertainment ventures are not affordable. If you try to go to a basketball game, you're talking about $60, $70 per ticket. Football is the same way. You can't take a family of 4, or you're gonna have to pay put off your rent payment. So I think it's we have this issue around zoning. It's important. We should use that as a lever for negotiation, but there's some bigger quality of life concerns that affect us and impact our community that we need to be concerned about.
Yeah. I do want to just follow up a little bit, because I think for people who don't maybe follow zoning issues very closely, which is a lot of us, what is our major concern about changing the zoning? Why would changing the zoning be such a big problem in your view?
So I think one of the main issues is also just in terms of the scope of what is being proposed. So Northwestern comes in and they say, we want, again, unlimited for-profit events up to 10,000 people. We want 10 concerts every summer, 35,000 people. These are extreme and should be viewed that way. It's something that's never been done or tested in that part of Evanston. And so you just go down the list. Well, what's that going to do to, given that Evanston is a town of, about around 70,000, so we're going to all of a sudden expect that our infrastructure can handle about, so maybe you assume there's some people who come from Evanston, but, tens of thousands of people driving in with limited access from a major highway pushed up against the lake. There was an article in the Tribune that pointed out that the traffic study that's been offered by Northwestern is only 7 pages, as opposed to a daycare on Central Street was maybe it depends on how you look. It was part of it was 40 pages, or another portion of it was tens of pages more. So the due diligence on this has just been extremely minimal, and to think that you could propose something that drastic and not study the effects that it would have on the entire community, not just the 7th Ward, should just be rejected at this point out of hand and not negotiated.
And I think,
Hey, let's say if I can just add something.
yeah, sure.
Zoning is a very big deal for the city of Evanston, always has been. Now, if this stadium was on Northwestern campus, then you can talk about zoning. It's not on Northwestern campus, it's in the city of Evanston on Northwestern's property, which they don't pay property taxes for. So it creates a different dynamic. It's in our community, it's not on their campus. So distinction needs to be made, at least during negotiations or discussions, of the impact. It would be like the city says we're going to use eminent domain and put something over on the campus. How's that going to go over?
Okay. So Northwestern is a nonprofit and accordingly enjoys real estate tax exemptions. Wouldn't this proposed for-profit idea jeopardize their tax-free status?
Well, so yeah, this is with the disclaimer that I'm not a tax attorney, but so the federal government. Let me put it this way: the federal government has figured out a way to tax what's called unrelated business income for a nonprofit, and I assume that that's part of how this would be treated. Again, don't use this as tax advice if you have your own nonprofit. But what Evanston has yet to figure out is, even when it comes to other things that the Northwestern is already doing, like this essentially a hotel, how are we going to get our fair share of that? Because the federal government is probably getting some unrelated business income taxation on that. How are we going to get our fair share of, for instance, even the broadcast rights on this thing? $100 million a year? Why can't Northwestern, just even out of some sense of goodwill to its community, say, we'd like to talk about how we can put some of that back into the schools?
And if I might just bring up another point regarding the fair share was talking about $4 to $6 million, and it seems like a lot of money, but this is just the scope of what's going on. The pension debt this year for police and fire is $280 million, and that's this year. If it goes to projected to the future, where it's supposed to be paid in full, it's costing the taxpayers, the homeowners, over $530 million, up to $1 billion. The interest that we're paying for our police and fire pension is $18 million a year. Why is that? In part because Northwestern refuses to negotiate, contribute, or engage in being a good neighbor.
Yep. And for Emily, I believe Northwestern's surplus is around $100 million, the surplus in their operating budget.
Yeah, I believe in this last year was somewhere around $138 million. And I mean, we're all looking at that. NUGW does a financial analysis of Northwestern's finances year to year, with the understanding that, we're looking at other graduate struggles when people are asking for increased stipends, a livable wage that you can actually, start to take those first life steps on that many of us as, full-fledged adults, like starting a family, right? How can you do that on these cases? But a lot of times, universities like to say, well, there simply is not the funds for this. It's simply too expensive. Hearing your story, Kevin, about this program that is successful being cut because it's simply too expensive. Like, what's up with that? Exactly, it's a rhetorical question. But, the reason, there will always be given a reason of it is too expensive, it is too onerous, and we have to make it, make things such that Northwestern cannot afford to not listen to us in saying that actually these things are non-negotiable. And so certainly having an understanding of what their operating expenses are like and poking holes in the idea that it is not as liquid to the degree that they can accommodate these important, acts of fairness and of taking benefits of this redevelopment and putting it back into the community, shining a light on that and questioning that rather than taking it as established, just as basis of fact is important. So yeah, certainly the operating surplus something to take note of.
Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thought. A couple of years ago, I guess before the pandemic, or right during the beginning of the pandemic, the university had a $94 million. They claimed. I always tell people, when you have $15.4 billion as an endowment, you don't have a deficit, right? They said we have a $94 million deficit. How did they remedy that? They took from the endowment and they erased the deficit with the blink of an eye. They made $138 million last year. The point that I'm making is that the university can do whatever is beneficial for this community if we as a community work together and actually push them to do the right thing. That's spot on.
So this, I think, also would be for Emily. We've talked about hiring and labor. What body is going to monitor and police the hiring practices of Northwestern in this new entertainment zone? And what penalties are in place or should be in place if they don't fulfill this promise?
That is a big question, and I'll be very upfront that I don't necessarily have an answer to that right off the bat. But what does strike me as important is it can't be something that relies just on the goodwill of Northwestern or their word. It needs to be something that is backed up by enforceable language. And that's why, we're going forward and getting a collective bargaining agreement and a contract, because that is something you can point to, that is enforceable language to rely on. And of course, you have to be able to, there needs to be a body to do that enforcing, right? And again, that's where it's not going to be enough to simply get Northwestern to even sign on to something legally binding regarding a community benefits agreement. There needs to be follow through and community engagement through to see it through, that it is actually made good on, and that a light is shown on if they are not meeting the obligations outlined in such a document. If we just put it out into the ether and then hope that they abide by it, that is also not going to necessarily be a recipe for success. And so sustained engagement with these things through the creation of such an agreement and figuring out what is in the wording, pressuring Northwestern to agree to such a thing, but then also following that through. And I understand I haven't given a concrete answer here in terms of what is actually the body to do that, but whatever body that is, whether that is a coalition like the one that we're starting to see come together through events so wonderfully coordinated like this, as that needs to be something that is sustained, certainly, and has that continued engagement. So not a full answer, but it is not going to be ongoing.
All right, thanks. So this question, I think, is kind of for Kevin, but again, anybody could answer. As I mentioned earlier, there has been a very definite attempt, I think, from Northwestern to make this a step forward against the Black community issue. There were several newspaper articles that quoted a lot of African American community leaders who were in favor of the project. So do we feel that this does actually reflect the view of African Americans in Evanston? And what is the best approach to convincing those people who believe that this is going to be particularly beneficial for them?
It's a tricky question because we have a long history here in our community of supporting Black leadership, and I can say this because I'm Black. I can say this, but we have a history of supporting Black leadership that has not always represented our community in a way that has advanced our community. And I can say that pretty substantively because as we look at the population of African Americans in Evanston, we have gone from from the time I came here in the 80s to the present day, we've gone down from 25% to about 16%, and it's dropping every year. Gentrification and housing issues with the city of Evanston, other issues of livability, which really have just not been addressed. That is not to say that black political leadership, some black political leadership has not tried to advance issues, but the reality is that we have been let down in a lot of ways. So I see this effort of marshaling particularly these black ministers who have been gathered together by the Haggerty Group to attempt to promote this narrative that this is somehow going to save black Evanston is really disingenuous. It's really kind of disgusts me that they would pursue such an approach.
If I may, Leslie, it's a typical strategy, right? To divide and conquer, and that's why we said fairness is what all Evanstonians want. I mean, that's what everybody wants. And fairness isn't. I mean, yes, there's racial discrimination in Evanston. There's all the stuff that you talked about, Kevin. That exists. That's real. It's not going away. But to use that as a tool to try to divide and separate the common good for everyone, that's really disheartening.
I just want to say, as somebody from the 7th Ward, is we want this project to be beneficial for the entire community. I just want to make sure that's clear. That the key to that, though, we believe, is to make sure that these guarantees are made in writing. And I think we can set our sights a little bit higher, too, because just this trickle-down approach that I was speaking about, that should be kind of like the baseline. Anybody who's doing a development in Evanston, there'll be some kind of spillover effects to the community. Here we have the major university, very powerful, very wealthy institution. They should be able to do more, and I think that's the point for the entire community. And if we band together, we can try to reach an agreement that is way more reasonable than this.
All right, thanks. All right, so we had a couple of questions about process and timing. When is the city council supposed to vote on changing the zoning? And is Northwestern trying to wrap this prior to the elections? Someone says they would like to see this be an issue in his ward and every ward during the campaign. And just to remind people, we have an election for 2 city council positions in the 2nd and the 9th ward on April 4th. So David or Kevin, I don't know if either one of you wants to answer that, just about process and...
So I mentioned in my opening remarks that there are 3 kind of main aspects to this. There's the building itself and the zoning sort of terminology. It's called the plan development application. Because it's such a huge project, there's actually a number of conditions that Northwestern has to prove up in front of the Land Use Commission, in front of City Council. It's not like it's a done deal the way Northwestern has been selling it. There's still many things that need to be reviewed just with the building itself, and city staff is doing that. I think one comment on that is, some folks say, well, Most Livable City, others, why don't do not trust city staff. Well, we do trust city staff, but we want to verify some of these things. These are major decisions for the entire community, and it's a lot for our city staff on its own to try to be able to handle, given everything else that they have going on in their day jobs. The second part is Northwestern submitted as a zoning text amendment. Even that, is potentially debatable proposition, because what they are doing is just completely changing the uses. So that has to go through land use and the city council. And then there's the liquor, changes that they would like that goes to the liquor control board. We could see some of this stuff in front of land use as soon as March, in terms of the building application and the zoning application.
Okay, Dave?
I'd just like to say that, all politics is local, and the council members are the ones that decide all of these things, from the committees to final legislation that's being voted up or down. My experience over 40 years is you talk to your alderman, you get involved, talk to people that are running, you get involved, you have dialogue, you communicate what your interests and your priorities are, and what you think the value of the city of Evanston is. I've lost a lot of fights in Evanston politics, but I've also won a lot. And you're not going to get anything unless you engage in speaking up for what you believe in. And that's just kind of how it works with democracy. I'm glad it works.
Okay, so kind of related to questions of City Council, this one was actually addressed to Dave. What dynamics on the City Council have you seen that have prevented them from being a tougher negotiator, and can they be changed? Does Northwestern threaten the city in some way? And another person asked, simply said, we need the City Council to take a firmer stand with Northwestern. Is there a group from Northwestern in the city to meet regularly to have discussions and reach agreements?
Well, I know there's ongoing talk about setting up negotiations with Northwestern. Under what name, I'm not exactly sure, but other host communities have pilot agreements. Northwestern influences a tremendous amount of power above and below the surface. I'm not going to make accusations, but they have the wherewithal, and they have a business school, and they can do things that may be legal that aren't right. They can help certain individuals out that look their way. Back when the city council had 19 members, what Northwestern did typically was run the elections for the city of Evanston. All they needed to do was get one more than 9, and they would fund the elections, and to your point, Kevin, typically taking advantage of African American communities in this 5th ward, in this part of Evanston going south. And they were very successful at getting their council members elected to do what they wanted. Reducing the council side, there's less representation, there's more accountability, but it's not for this panel to do anything about it. It's up for our council members to hear what we're saying, take action, form legislation, form ordinances that are they're protect the interests of the citizens of Evanston. That's it. Northwestern will use its full power and weight to twist them however they want. Previous councils in the past have been intimidated, have been threatened, have been cajoled, have been manipulated. That's why nothing's happened up to this point.
Okay, Kevin?
I would like to see leadership from Daniel Biss. I don't think we're seeing any leadership from the mayor. I think that's his responsibility. And I've been really troubled by the fact that he kind of is waiting to see the way, which way the wind is blowing on the issue. I think we have to get out in front of this, so that we need to see that happen. But I agree with one of the things that I've seen on City Council in my tenure is that I would say somewhat there are conflicts of interest that are occurring. People that work for the university are on council now. People that have affiliations with the university are still on council. And I just think as a community, we've got to do a better job of calling that out and naming it so that if we can surface these issues, I think the truth is a very powerful antidote. So I'd like to encourage people to do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. That transparency, right? That's what it's all about. Just what you see is what you get. No backroom deals.
Okay. All right. This next one I think is, again, a little bit more for David. This coalition needs to fully separate the issues. 1, the stadium, and 2, the zoning text amendment. No one is against a new stadium. Well, I wouldn't actually say no, but most of us are not categorically against a new stadium. As for the zoning amendment, I reviewed the application and its direct attachments. While the application speaks a lot about a stadium, it does not provide any shred of evidence in support of the actual text amendment. And I'm disappointed at any compromise that would allow the text amendment. So David, first of all, if you could explain what the text amendment means.
Right, so the zoning amendment is what Northwestern wants the city to approve so that it could do the big concerts, the 35,000 people, pack it up, more people than the United Center. They also put in there these, I guess you could call them, technically they are smaller, but up to 10,000 people. I mean, that's bigger than the arena. and a limited number of those, which was a surprise because they never talked to that at any of the 7th Ward presentations that they've done. Just completely, tried to put that in there without any, telegraphing us to let us know that might be one of their ideas. So here's just to kind of take one detail that I think illustrates this. Right now, under the zoning code, they can do events of up to 10,000 people so long as they're for our community. So, you know how they send the glossy around, the little postcard that shows the Winter Festival, and wouldn't it be great if we all could go down there and, have a little market and skate around? I mean, I play ice hockey, that sounds fun. But here's what I have a problem with. They're not going to be doing that out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to give it to the highest bidder. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of keep the zoning code. They could actually do a lot of these events that a lot of people would be interested in. Let's see how that goes, because they're not doing it right now while it's nonprofit. Apparently they only are interested in doing it if they make money off of the thing, because they struck the word nonprofit from our zoning code.
I guess I'll add back to my previous comment, your comment, Dave. The deal is that you have to be able to negotiate with somebody. If the city in Northwestern cannot set up meetings to negotiate a pilot program at this point, if the council, the Finance and Budget Committee can't see the wherewithal, that there is no other time than right now, this week, next week. Next week it's going to be March. As you said, this could be on the fast track. I don't think it should be. I think you put the brakes on, transparency, see what's in the closet, underneath the rug, under the bed. But the council needs to meet with the planning, the Budget and Finance Committee, has a task force that needs to meet with Northwestern to discuss the terms and the conditions of what is going on here. This isn't just an ad hoc, we're going to give you what we want, you're going to do it, or like you said, well, they didn't discuss the number of people. All right, well, now they have this 10. Well, next year, we don't like that. We want everything 35,000 people because we make more money. What's the city going to do? That's what they did with taking property off the tax rolls. We won't do it. Why they said they did, the next month they took 1,900 Sherman off the tax. If they had any good faith history that I'm aware of in 40 years plus, I would bring it up. They don't. I'm sorry. I'd like to say they do, but they don't.
I just wanted to say one thing in addition, which is that, for Most Livable City and all the members, we've got, hundreds who have signed up and are working with us, over 1,000 that signed our petition that said no for-profit uses in the zoning. So our position is we're not going to be used as a bargaining chip over this. We could be part of a coalition, but there's plenty to bargain over that does not include a for-profit entertainment center in that neighborhood.
So David just answered 4 of the questions that I got, whether or not we want to compromise over the zoning, and I think the general feeling is no, that there are other things that we might use as bargaining chips, but the zoning would not be one of them.
There's a little nuance in terms of with the planned development application, right? That's the fact that they want to do this major building. There are things in there that they will need. I guess technically it's not a variance, it's a site development allowance or something like that. That goes to the parking. So they currently, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but they're nowhere near satisfying the city's code on the number of parking spaces they need. They're trying to, the height of the thing is going to go from like 45 feet around to over 100 feet. I believe they may need some potentially a site development allowance for that as well. So there's a lot to negotiate over that, again, does not include this experiment that they want to put in place for our entire community of just, hey, let's make as much money as we want off this thing, and then we'll see how it goes for you.
Right. And I believe that before the pandemic, Northwestern was in negotiations to do temporary concert licenses as opposed to permanent changes to the zoning, correct? Yeah.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Before the pandemic, Northwestern was in negotiations with the city to do temporary licenses for concerts without doing changes to the zoning, correct?
Well, what had happened was back in 2019, they were able to push through a temporary period to do for-profit concerts at the arena. Then COVID happened, and they were not, able to take advantage. At that time, actually, a representative of the university said in a public hearing, direct quote, "We will not be coming back in a few years to try to change the zoning for the stadium in order to do concerts at the stadium." So that tells you, and we have the video, that tells you how much you can trust their words. So get it in writing.
Yep, get it in writing.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing that's kind of off topic. One of the reasons, and I've had discussions with the people in the athletic department, and there was this notion that, well, we're decreasing the size of the stadium, and so that should help improve the situation with parking and the crowds and so forth. But the reality is, because of the new Big Ten contract, there is a desire by people who work in the athletic department to create sellouts. And so the shrinking of the facility is more in line with being able to promote that you have sold out your facility.
And follow up what you're saying, Dave. The council needs to speak with one voice, and they need to speak clearly what their issues are. I learned a long time ago the best practice is not to negotiate against myself, right? You sit down with who you're negotiating with, you have your points, they have theirs. I'm not going to read off of their list of demands. Okay, I'm not there to do that. They represent themselves. The city has to represent us.
Right. So another question about Northwestern, I think this would probably be more for Emily. We're talking about a monolith. However, it feels as though the agenda is being pushed by a coalition of athletic staff, alumni, and Ryan. But how does the rest of Northwestern feel about this, and how can we mobilize other forces at Northwestern? And I'm happy to see there's a lot of people here who I know are either students or staff and faculty at Northwestern. But Emily, what would your response to that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important point that Northwestern as a monolith, or the idea of Northwestern as a monolith, belies the fact that there are a lot of us who work within Northwestern who see these things happening, have similar things happening on campus ourselves, developments of buildings, seeing money being funneled into these shiny, beautiful edifices that, you don't get to go in while, like me, for example, there's literally sewage raining down from the ceiling of my lab and onto like expensive laser equipments, and it's a health hazard. And I'm like, why is this not being solved? But, there's this, stadium happening, right? So there's a question of plenty of segments of folks who are, we're, you would say within Northwestern, right? We are employed by Northwestern, and yet we see that even for that is not enough to guarantee that Northwestern will do right by us as employees. And we have to put their feet to the fire on that and say, no, actually, this is what we deserve, and we are, we're not going to let go of that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity here for seeing the connections and things we have in common in this fight, to have the stadium be something that is a common good. There are ways in which it can, benefit those of us who, there are plenty of folks, graduate workers, staff, right, who work at Northwestern but live in Evanston as well, and, seeing that overlap and seeing it not as an adversarial thing so much as like, oh, we have a common interest here. And if if we recognize and build on that common interest and push for it together, that's all the more voices pushing for this thing. So I think being able to note where those points of commonality are and how we can push more effectively for them together is very important, because certainly, I mean, as graduate workers, right, we're making a lot of wheels turn at Northwestern and making that academic and educational and research enterprise function, frankly, at its base. And so I think all of us have some pressure point with Northwestern admin, and deploying that within a coalition, so we're all leaning on those pressure points simultaneously, I think will be a very good thing to see.
So another question we had was, how many Evanston citizens, not professors, are employed by Northwestern, and do we know how many Black and brown residents work for Northwestern, approximately?
You know, I don't know the current figure because I've been out of touch with this for a while, but, you know, Northwestern is the largest owner, the largest employer, uses the most services, and I think it was Evanston Hospital and St. Francis is how it worked out. Those two are also non-for-profit. Part of the fair share is basically to correlate land ownership and land usage and zoning stuff directly for services received from the citizens of Evanston. I don't know the makeup of the African Americans, Hispanics, whites that work there, so I'm not sure of that. Somebody else does.
I can just speak to the student population, and this saddens me to say, when I was a student at Northwestern from 1981 to 85. At that time, we had about 10% of the students were African American. That was in 81 to 85. Today, that percentage is, I think, around 7%. So, over the years, there has been no sustained effort to improve upon those percentages in the student body. I can't speak to the faculty, although I know that there's supposedly an effort underway to increase that number, but student population is not increased.
I did just want to add a point because it was something that we learned in a recent 7th Ward meeting about if they were going to use their preferred vendor, Levy, at they use them at the arena right now for concession sales, including alcohol, and so it was kind of topic around if they're able to get that approval for the stadium. And we asked, well, okay, Levy, so what percentage do you currently employ of local residents? They didn't have that information at their fingertips. Said they'd get back to us. Haven't heard. But then you also may want to Google Levy and the United Center and see what the union workers there are going through right now, because they did a survey of their members, and these are not good-paying jobs. Their members can barely afford to make ends meet. A lot of them are on government benefits and or visiting a food pantry. So we really need to scrutinize some of these marketing claims that are coming from Northwestern and who they're planning to use as their preferred business partners here.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Emily?
I'll add as well that it's a common pattern we've seen in several places with Northwestern of offsetting responsibility to taking care of their workers when those are workers employed by a contractor. So not recognizing their own, seeing that there is a complicity in the mistreatment of workers who are benefiting your community, who are driving your intercampus shuttles, who are taking out your trash, who are serving food. These are also essential tasks for the functioning of the university. And when you try and push on things related to these services, the compensation for these workers, Northwestern likes to say, well, it's a contractor, it's not, it's a third-party vendor. We don't know, and that simply can't be acceptable to us, and we have to put our foot down about it. And certainly with regard to the stadium, we can expect to see a great deal of contract work, both in its construction redevelopment, but also in its maintenance once it is built. That is a place certainly we're seeing a neutrality statement regarding unionization of workers, seeing a commitment from Northwestern that it is not enough for direct employees of Northwestern, which isn't even the case right now. As a graduate worker myself, I'm directly employed by Northwestern, and here we are bargaining our contract. But for contract workers as well, we can't let them have that cover to cede responsibility.
And Emily, could you just quickly explain what a neutrality contract is?
Yeah, so essentially with a neutrality agreement, the employer, Northwestern, would say we are not going to take retaliatory action against workers who are engaging in unionizing. And it sounds pretty decent on its face, not a big thing to commit to, and yet I find it's a big thing to commit to, or they don't want to do it. And ask yourselves why are you opposed to workers having a say in their workplace conditions? Well, it's about ceding that unilateral control, right? And I think it's worth the fight to point out that when workers are advocating for their needs, when workers have that path to say this is what this was what will make this a sustainable workplace for me, a sustaining job, a job I can work while raising a family. That's going to overall improve, our community, our culture here. That's a good thing, and Northwestern as the employer doesn't necessarily want to cede that. But if we can fight for that, that is something that is worthwhile.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing as we were talking about the campus population that's troubling to me as an alum is that we're heading towards closer to 70% of the students that attend the university are now paying the full freight. So when we think about the population of folks who are at the university and what it is becoming, I think that this proposal sort of is in line with that mentality that we're starting to see. And that's why I keep raising this ethical and this moral issue as we walk by people who don't have housing. And then we talk about celebrating an entertainment complex of $1 billion. It just seems quite insane to me.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that in addition to the graduate students, we have 2 representatives here from the undergraduate organizing group, Students Organizing for Labor, and they wanted to just say a little bit about their experience.
Hi, I'm Hannah and this is Karen. We're both fairly new to Students Organizing for Labor Rights as a part of the Northwestern Coalition. And it has been around since 2018. Karen kind of can talk a little bit about the history of solar. So Students Organizing for Labor Rights was founded in 2018 in response to Northwestern's transition from Sodexo and Aramark to Compass as Northwestern's food service provider. And workers were essentially worried about whether or not they'd be able to keep their jobs, benefits, and pay. So Solar has since then supported workers financially throughout the pandemic, and in 2021 mobilized student support when workers were negotiating their contract for a living wage and guaranteed health insurance. Yeah, so a lot of what Emily was saying earlier was a lot of work that Solar has kind of been a part of since undergrad students are mostly in contact with the campus workers. Some of the work just in like the past quarter that we've been here have been, having communication with the Starbucks workers at North Center, also with the Aramark workers as a part of their contract with Northwestern, and right now they don't have access to the dining halls. And echoing a lot of what the panelists have said is that it shows just like if Northwestern doesn't treat the workers that they have right now with dignity, so why trust the promises that they make with the construction of the new Ryan Fieldhouse? And specifically with our position as undergrad students, that we acknowledge that we have access to financial, social, and intellectual resources that are often withheld from individuals involved with labor movements and the general public. But as our organization, we aspire to leverage these privileges in order to demand better conditions for our workers, and using our unique position as students to hold universities and multinational corporations accountable to the students whom they appoint on our campus and in our community. So we just wanted to here to show our support and also show that there are undergraduate organizations, not just Solar, that would continue to show their support for this coalition. And here in just to offer a little bit of student perspective. So Anna and I were reflecting on sort of the feelings towards the building and the construction of the new stadium. We were talking about how there's such a clear difference in opinion. There's leniency within being a Northwestern student to not care and to not have any urgency to care about Evanston at large and the impact of Northwestern. But then there are the students within Solar and associated with Solar who are obviously here and care and want to leverage our positionality and the power that we have So we just wanted to be here to offer student perspective and show that we're here.
So I think the next time you hear anyone say that this is just people who have a grudge against Northwestern, remember those voices. Want to get back to some questions about livability in the 7th Ward. What possible forms of compensation will the 7th Ward residents receive, or should 7th Ward residents be asking for enduring the proposed 3 years of construction, noise, trucks, traffic, etc.?
I would suggest that's a part of the negotiation process with Northwestern. I mean, that's got to be one of the things. Who knows the actual scope, delay of labor, delay of materials, impact to neighbors, dust, debris, hazardous materials, stuff being removed. There's a wide variety of stuff that's got to be encompassed during negotiations. These are the things that, on its face, it looks stadium up, yes or no, but there's a huge impact to traffic patterns during the course of deconstruction and construction, where the supplies are going to be held, how the workers get there, where the workers parking, there's a lot of nuts and bolts to spending $1 billion, and it's going to really impact the community, I think, in a not real positive way, unless the city lays that out in part of its negotiation plan. And the pilot program really needs to be the focus, as I said earlier. This is the leverage to get things done, and this has all got to be part of that plan.
I just wanted to say, as part of the negotiations, I've been talking to people in the community about this, and one of the some of the items that were just discussed, people are not considering the added cost to the taxpayer just as a result of the construction. And there are going to be costs in terms of city staff, as well as things that the attached things that are around the construction that the city really shouldn't be responsible for. And Northwestern is pushing a message that this is not going to be a cost to the city of Evanston, that they're going to float the whole thing as private funds. But they are not talking about the added cost for such a massive complex.
Yeah, I think I have 3 quick points I'd like to try to make. So one is just in terms of, it might be helpful to share that for, a lot of us in Most Livable City, I think we do have, and neighbors around the 7th Ward and elsewhere in Evanston worry about construction. We have some concerns, but we've been kind of just trying to catch up to Northwestern, surprising with the everything else that they're trying to do with this, that we haven't had a lot of time to scrutinize what their plans are in terms of keeping us, all safe in the neighborhood with, what's the impact on kind of airborne debris? Should I be concerned as a father with 2 little kids that that's going to cause some problems for them? We haven't really had time to dig into that, and, we're hopeful, though, that our, city staff are thinking about that. And I was just going to say the 2 other points, though, around the kind of as it comes to permit fees that Northwestern is kind of putting on their marketing materials. One point on that is that's just what anybody would have to pay if they wanted to do a big thing in our city. I don't understand how that's something that they're supposed to get extra credit for. And then the second is it too late for us to increase the permit fee? Because maybe we should, because, $10 million, I'm not sure that that's enough.
Yeah, I was just going to add, when you look at development and pollution to that neighborhood, it wasn't that long ago that, Evanston Hospital had an incinerator, and that went on ad nauseum. The citizens, the 7th Ward citizens, and adjacent, depending on whichever the way the wind blew, were all exposed to that contact, and that took Herculean effort to get them to shut it down. It's a small thing. Evanston Hospital, or North Shore, compared to Northwestern, is not even on the same map. So anything that comes up that impacts the residents, unless it's pre-planned in a contract in writing with the remedy for arbitration or court where costs are associated, it's going to be a tough battle.
Okay. This would probably be one for Emily or possibly Kevin. Why not include among the demands that Northwestern insource rather than outsource as many jobs as possible, so the university is directly accountable for workers and working conditions? And the city of Evanston should do this as well.
I'll just make a quick comment from my labor background. You know, Article 1 in any contract is employers' rights, and unfortunately, employers have the rights. You got to negotiate for whatever else you get.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would echo that, and then I think either way there has to be accountability for workers, whether that is, you know, insourced, directly employed by Northwestern or through a contractor. I think like it. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly like I'm not too sure on this point, but I think that either way that it's going with that. I think seeing routes to have more accountability with Northwestern on this front would be good. I mean, certainly the question of you know, the intercampus shuttle, which I alluded to earlier, that's one of those places where Northwestern likes to you know, kind of say, well, there's not too much we can do about it because it's a third-party vendor. But I know folks who, like a good friend of mine, you know, went to another university, a large university, where you know, she got her CDL as a student and drove a bus for the campus bus system. You know, why? I mean, that seems like a very obvious place where you could have you know, a service for folks who are, you know, working at Northwestern, but also folks who live in that area and could benefit from such transit. Why don't we have you know, transit options like that are available to members of Northwestern University, but also community members who are in proximity to those goods? Why don't we have that as a place for job training, for learning a skill? And you know, instead what we have has something that is, you know, displaced through a vendor that Northwestern doesn't feel any responsibility to have accountability around the treatment of those workers. So I mean, I think there's definitely avenues to explore there, but even in the case where, you know, whether or not that is direct employment through Northwestern or through a contractor, either way there still needs to be accountability to folks being treated well in those positions and compensated fairly, because it is not enough to just assume that that's going to happen through goodwill and a sense of altruism.
Yeah. Kevin?
This points to what we began with when we started today. Between 2012 and 2019, and the reason I know these things, I used to work pretty closely with the Vice President of Facilities Management at the university. So there were a couple $2 billion worth of projects on his table. And we didn't hear any of this that we're hearing now about stadium. We didn't hear anything about directing resources to minority contractors. We didn't hear anything about creating workforce development or training. We didn't hear any of it. And those of us who live here and who've watched those buildings go up between 2012 and 2018 know that for a fact, that all of what is being discussed today about the benefits to the Evanston community were not discussed with those projects. And those projects were worth more than this current project that's being discussed now. So it's why we are suspicious about anything that the university says, and it's one of the reasons why I just don't believe them.
Okay.
Well, you can believe them by their actions, right?
Right.
If they haven't done anything in the last 150 years,
we
you
got
can pretty much believe.
We got a bunch more questions. All right. Also, just a time check. It is 4:30. We have the place to 5. We wanted to try and wrap up in the next 15 minutes or so, and I've still got about at least 5 questions I want to get to. But if your question doesn't get answered, at the back of the room, there's a flyer you can take when you go out that has a little bit more information about what we're thinking of in terms of organizing as a coalition. There's a website and a QR code that you can use to get onto the mailing list for this coalition, and also to get on the mailing list of the individual organizations. So please continue to send us questions that might not have gotten answered today, and we will take those very seriously. You can also use the post-its on the window to add information or questions that you have. But let's get to the rest of the written questions we have now. Several questions about legal strategies. So when Northwestern took properties off the tax rolls after promising not to, was there a lawsuit? Are these agreements legal, or were they just good faith handshakes? And if not, why weren't they legal agreements?
It was a handshake. I mean, it was a handshake agreement. There was obviously a fair share referendum passed unanimously, and this is what Northwestern said they were going to do. In the first instance, was less than 60 days after that, where they took 1,900 chairmen off the tax rolls. Northwestern didn't do anything illegal. They just did something unethical. They didn't do the right thing, and just because the law doesn't cover that. In my experience, there's a lot of bad people out there that aren't doing anything illegal, and the people that have that much money can help write the laws, so they don't. I mean, that's just kind of how life works. I talked to the attorney.
Well, I don't have a grand legal strategy worked out, but I do. So this example of the hotel basically that they have is an interesting one, because I believe what occurred there was later on the city did try to put some additional fees and taxes in place, and Northwestern sued the city and said, "Oh, you can't do that. You're treating us differently than everybody else." So we have this charter. It said they just kind of push it back. So this may be more point around kind of bargaining strategy. Well, we need to take care of those issues on the front end of when Northwestern wants to build something. We shouldn't be trying to do it afterwards and seeing what we can do with some sort of fee and tax and having buyer's remorse about letting them get everything they wanted on the front end.
And unfortunately, in my experience, Northwestern's legal team over the years doesn't do the best. I mean, it's government legal service. It's not the same caliber as Northwestern's lawyers. I mean, unfortunately, money buys you real good lawyers. That's how it works.
Yep. And if you're interested in the history of Northwestern's relationship with Evanston and a lot of these issues, you can go to the website spotlightevanston.org, which has a great historical timeline of a lot of these issues that we're talking about. Another question related to legal stuff. Does the city have an attorney involved in the negotiating process?
I don't have an answer to that.
I think maybe just kind of, I just set aside the legal. I don't know what the city's negotiating strategy is at all at this point, and that worries me. I mean, I think, isn't that why we're all here?
Yeah.
There could be, I'm not in the know. I have FOIA things from time to time. I don't know if that's going to give me the answers, but we're trying to talk to, council members. We're trying, but where is kind of like, what's our grand strategy for this? How are we going to use this once in a lifetime opportunity so that we can finally get back on an equal footing with this powerful institution that, yes, is our neighbor, and they do a lot of good things for the community, but they're simply not doing enough.
So I would also say that we do have at least a couple of council members here. I had made it clear to the council members that I was happy that they were here to listen, not primarily to speak. But, I'm sorry?
Can they stand up?
Yeah, so Claire, Chrissy, and I also, I don't know for sure, but I think a couple of the council members are also watching from home on Zoom, and several of them said that they would be very interested to see the video of this. But those council members may be around for a little bit after this. We also have a couple of candidates for city council here. We have Darlene Cannon here about your concerns. Here's a possible suggestion. To point out the hypocrisy of a nonprofit university running a for-profit entertainment center, can we paint Northwestern as the national poster child for elite university overreach?
You know what? I would just comment to that. There used to be a place over there we're talking about now that was called Dyke Stadium, and that was in perpetuity, whatever that means to Northwestern. But you can buy perpetuity, and that's what Northwestern is all about. It doesn't care. Yes, it cares about its prestige amongst its fellow Northwestern, or Yale, Harvard, the other big schools. It wants to be elite. It doesn't care about much else that has been demonstrated that I've seen in my 65 years being here. So, and my father worked at Northwestern for 35 years. So,
Yeah, Emily, Kevin, same question.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view on this is the point of leverage is the stadium itself. I mean, why we should stop talking about it as if it's a done deal. It's not. We're just at the beginning of this process, and there's so many remaining questions, and including a lot of us been asking questions Northwestern for the data that they're using, their assumptions, refuse to get the answers, provide us with the answers. So I think basically we'll have to focus on that and talk in a serious way about, before we can get the approval on that, what are going to be some of the community benefits that will be offered.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I agree. I've told other people that it's not a done deal. I worked on a project in Sacramento, California, when the Maloofs were trying to build a new facility downtown Sacramento, and the community rose up because they said, as taxpayers, we're not paying for, any more billionaire projects. And even though this university has said that it's footing the bill, I still think there are a lot of issues in its own house that it hasn't really dealt with that could use these funds. And these have to do with students. We've got students at Northwestern, not a lot, but there are some that are homeless. There are some that do have real serious financial issues, and there are some that are not getting the financial support in terms of the financial aid that they need to be successful and to be comfortable in their academic journey. So there are a lot of things that are going on at the university that should be taken care of in lieu of this large project. So I don't think it's a done deal, and I think we should stop. If we don't want it, we should stop it. If we do want it, then we do need to put together a community benefits agreement.
Emily, would you want?
Again, just echoing all of that, and certainly the idea that Northwestern really, really wants this thing, right? They really want it. They want to be able to have the shiny stadium be in the Big Ten, have that competitive edge with the other elite institutions. I mean, I see this all the time in my grad program, right? We want to be competing with the chemistry program at Berkeley, the chemistry program here, and it's like, well, what about those of us who are in this program? Like, why can't we do right by those of us who are here, working here, living here, right? And so, same with the stadium. It's a question of we need to focus on how much Northwestern wants it and say, if the stadium didn't happen, what's the, it's being pitched again as this huge favor, right? It's all private donated money. It's this benefit we're giving to, we're dining to, make this stadium better for you all, and without actually questioning, well, what actually would make it good for us. And so I think having the courage to look square in the face of the alternative of, what does it mean to Northwestern if there is no stadium redevelopment? What does it mean to us? And being willing to kind of drive that hard point with Northwestern in the course of negotiation to make them understand what is the alternative if they don't come in good faith. What is the cost to them? We have to make that cost too high for them to feel that they can afford, whether that is a financial cost, whether that is a reputational cost, which I think is very big, whether it is an optics cost. Those are things to explore. So, yeah.
All right. We are sadly going to be wrapping up in a second, but just wanted to mention a couple of things going forward. There is a pilot task force that's payment in lieu of taxation. There was a pilot task force that was referred out of the Finance and Budget Committee with unanimous support and is going to be coming before the City Council soon. So one simple thing you can do is look for that when that comes before Council and strongly encourage your council member to support it. Or even now, just call up or email your council member and say that you strongly support the pilot task force referral. And David, I wonder if you could just sort of quickly go through steps we should be doing going forward in terms of how fast this project is moving.
Well, I will echo, we should all say we're in support of the pilot task force. I think that's the key step is to figure out, let's value those properties that Northwestern owns and figure out how much they should be bringing to the table. And that's a task force that would do a lot of good. And so in terms of the next steps, I think we did on the flyer there put both a link and a QR code. So on your way out, if you'd like to get more updates from the coalition, you can also sign up for updates from each individual group you heard from today. And we're doing this all on the fly, but we're going to try to work together and see if we could get some agreement around what our key issues would be. And please do sign up so that we can keep you informed. We'll need everybody's help to try to get this back on track.
So, go ahead. So a couple things going forward. As I said, grab a flyer, not the flyer that has the information about this meeting, but grab the handout that's on the back table that has some more information about next steps and how to sign up to be in contact with us. And again, just to emphasize, part of the reason for this was to give you more information. So when someone tells you, oh, this project is going to bring so much money to Black and brown employees, you can reply with some of the information that Kevin and Emily and David and Dave have shared. Or when they say, well, we can't possibly afford to do this because our endowment is sacred to education, you can mention that they have over $100 million in operating budget surplus and all the other reasons why they clearly can afford to do this and that other major universities are able to do this. So we wanted this to be something that will just strengthen your ability to make the argument with your neighbors, but also with your council member. Use the information that you got today, use the information that's on the Most Livable City Association website to make a stronger argument to your council member about why they need to be pushing back about the zoning changes, why they need to be negotiating more firmly. And a question that I got from a lot of people was, how do we convince the city council? How do we force the city council to negotiate more aggressively? And the answer is really the people in this room, that we all have to be, not just the 7th Ward, but everybody has to be making these same arguments, speaking with the same voice, not just about what's going on in the 7th Ward, but how the pollution is going to affect everyone, how being blocked from using Central Street when you need to get to Evanston Hospital, how that is going to affect everybody, how the jobs programs that they are promising are very weak, and how we can use this as an opportunity to demand substantial permanent jobs for people in Evanston and substantial regular contributions to Evanston's needs. So that is really on all of us, and we're really here to just help organize people to make our voices heard. So, want to thank a couple of people. First of all, Zoe Greenfield over there, who's been managing the hybrid meeting and did all of our tech setup. Thank you so much. To all the members of Community Alliance for Better Government that are here, of Solar, of Northwestern University Graduate Workers, of Central Street Neighbors. Thank you all so much for coming early and setting up and for all your input into the program. And of course, our fantastic panel, Emily Lozer, Dave Ellis, Kevin Brown, and David DeCarlo. Thank you guys so much for all the wonderful information you shared.
Thank you, Leslie, for having us here. It's been an honor to speak in front of everybody. Fair share was a while ago. 86% of the people supported. I'm sure it's the same numbers now that support the effort going forward.
Okay, and I was going to ask everybody on the panel if they wanted a final statement, and Dave anticipated me. So, Emily, final thoughts.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you, Leslie, and all the other folks who organized and coordinated this event. It's all of this happens when we come together and fight for things. It's not ever going to work if we just expect things to just happen by a few people. We need to all be invested, and we're going to win what we're organized to take. So I, want to kind of end there, and also on, we need to be building these connections with each other and being in this fight together rather than as individuals just, throwing it out into the void. And so, that's going to be the vehicle where we can actually make a movement here. So looking forward to working with all of you moving forward.
All right, Kevin.
I just want to thank everybody who attended. Thank you, Leslie, for inviting me. Thank you all for those who have come and supported this whole entire effort. I really believe Evanston is probably the best place to live in the world. That's why I've stayed here for so long. It is a fantastic community with fantastic people who care very deeply about their neighbors, and this is a righteous fight, and I'm in it with you, and I will fight to the end. So thank you.
I just want to reiterate the point that I did make earlier that, you know, Evanston has all these great amenities, we all know them, but it's our values that make this a livable place and living up to those values. So I really hope, I would be so disappointed if Progressive Evanston cannot reach a better agreement than what has been offered. And I hope we'll all join together and ask for that.
All right. So we're going to wrap up now. Please, if you haven't signed in, make sure you did. Make sure you get the handout in the back. And since I come from an organizing background, we have to end with a chant. So, I believe. I believe. I believe that we. I believe that we. I believe that we will win. 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 All right. Have a safe trip home, everybody.
Call us Sutton.
And your Carl?
Yeah.
Well, he's got the mask on. Bob, walk through.
Oh, please.
I'm just related to
My mom.
Elizabeth. Yeah. Oh, I love Elizabeth.
She works here all the time.
When he announced
It's
he went down to
Yeah.
February,
Yeah.
in St. Louis, when he announced he was